Welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. The reverb on the intro means that, again, I'm exhausted. It's 8:46. I'm hungry. And I want to go home. So rather than doing what I've been doing and recording after I see the movie on my laptop and then re-editing the episode later, it's also very cold. When I say very cold, I mean it's 41 degrees. I'm not dressed for the weather. And sitting in my car as it warms up in the parking lot of a movie theater isn't fun for me. So we're going to do this the phone way, and I'm going to record my thoughts as I drive home. So hopefully you're strapped in for this. Today we're talking about, as the title would suggest, Spencer, the biopic. I guess we'll call it a biopic, even though it does take liberties with, reality, which isn't a problem necessarily, because a biopic, there is no truly factual biopic, and I think it's the first thing we really need to address here, is that the idea of a factual biopic is a fallacy, because in the same way there is no such thing as objective journalism, because be it, language choice, be it, what the fuck is that? Bath and Body Works. Be it language choice, be it, political leanings of the writer, everything's going to influence the way that something is framed and something is done. If the people involved in the biopic are still alive, that's certainly going to influence how it comes across. And now that's less the issue here, because, it's telling the story of Princess Diana, and most of the people involved are still alive. Her kids are still alive, her husband's still alive, or her ex-husband's still alive. The Queen is still alive. So, all of these principal, actors, for lack of a better word, are all still alive and still, there. The movie doesn't seem to be concerned with the prospect of pissing off the the Queen of England and the royal family. Which, okay, I mean, here's the thing. The liberties it takes are, probably for the sake of entertaining. And this is probably the first time in history of both the biopic as a genre and maybe in film. I'm not super well versed in other times this has happened, but I'm thinking this is probably the first time that a biopic has blended with has blended with a psychological thriller in this way, where the character arc that Diana goes through is similar to what you'd see in any number of other movies. And the one that I got to the end and I was really, the number one comparison when I reached the end of this movie, and I know this is going to sound bad considering everything else I talk about on this fucking show, the most striking comparison is Joker, where we watch this movie happen, we watch her mental decline, and we understand why it happens, and then when we get to the end, it all makes sense. The difference is, rather than going on to a nighttime talk show and shooting Robert De Niro in the face, Princess Diana, takes her kids and leaves at Christmas. And I gotta give the movie credit. It does a great job with really building in every little thing about it. And there are a lot of things in this movie besides Kristen Stewart's performance, and I cannot say enough to praise Kristen Stewart's performance. I don't think that I've ever seen an Oscar race where it's this clear cut, this far out, that there is no chance of anyone winning Best Actress this year besides Kristen Stewart. I probably would have said that last year with Chadwick Boseman, but, I probably would have, this is the first time that, based on performance, there's this clear of a winner that already, because she carries the movie on her back. through her performance, because a lot of times she's playing off of herself, she's playing off of small cast members who don't have huge roles, and it's one of those things where everything about this movie comes down to her and what she does. Now, so there is a lot in this movie that really builds into this. What's what I'm looking for? It's not just her performance that sells the psychological decline and all of that. There are other things in the movie that really are caked into it from a direction standpoint that allow us as the audience to feel it with her, which is a big part of a psychological thriller. It's like Last Night in Soho was not a psychological thriller, it was a paranormal horror movie. This one does more because it can generate the same emotions that the main character is feeling. Through the use of cinematography, you can project those feelings onto the audience. And this movie is a masterclass in that. And I think that this movie is one that can be used as soon as it comes out on DVD in a film class to project emotions onto an audience. And I think that, let's start out with, the most basic, and that's framing shots in a way that can, create anxiety. And this movie does that a lot, where toward the beginning and at the church around Christmas, I'm going to spoil the movie, but it's also a movie about Princess Diana's life, even if it is slightly dramatized or majorly dramatized. It's all kind of public record. So when you look at the scene at Christmas where she's there and the paparazzi's all taking pictures and all that is going on, and other times at dinner and when she first arrives and all of that, they'll use a very tight close-up on her face, and the camera will it won't just be a static on her face, it'll be the camera moving. Because what that does is it creates this kind of claustrophobia in the viewer, because we have taken the space that we normally would have this, for a shot like this of her, being pictures taken by paparazzi. Typically in a movie, we would see that shot from a wide angle, and we would see, broadly, it'd be a glamour shot to make her look like she's, to make it look like she's, equal participant in this thing, and it's not just them full whole cloth taking advantage of her. So I think that this, when you pull it in that close, what you do is you generate this sense of claustrophobia where you feel as trapped as she does then, because there is nothing behind her of value. You see the sky, but there is nothing really behind her that can make you feel like you are, you are able to escape, which is a big part of this. So that's one thing. Another thing is music swelling. In one scene, they make full use of a string quartet that is in the room, and for the scene is kind of told from the perspective of Diana. No one else at the dinner table it's not that they're not in focus, but they're not important. Besides Charles. Charles is the only one who's important in that scene. He's the only one who she's seeing. Everyone else around them might as well be no one. It might as well just be them two in the scene. And as she's in this scene, and as she's, dealing with the fact that this pearl necklace that she got was the same pearl necklace that, he got for, I guess it would be Camilla. Because it's the same thing, he, it's tugging at her, and she can, she's pawing at it, and, it's this real, primal get this thing off of me kind of mentality that she's expressing through that. And all while that's happening, the music's getting louder and louder and louder, and it just builds the anxiety of the scene. And it does that very well. And one final thing this movie does that, to really lay into that is, it's a small thing, but I picked up while I was watching. It's that as the movie goes on, and her her mental state declines. One of the things that's kind of contrasting all of that is the sheer opulence that the royal family displays through the entire movie. It is consumption on a scale that is disgusting, like to the point where it's like you have all of these options in front of you, all of these delicious foods, all of this stuff. This house is massive, and everything around them is, painted gold and beautiful, and all of that around them is happening, and yet you still feel as she's going through this moment, and as she's, as this is all happening, it's kind of contrasting with who she is, and that's a major part of it. And we get to one, as you go through, it's kind of used in the same way you would use a title card. It's going for dinner, or going for a meal. And as her mental state deteriorates, the meals get more intricate and more nuanced, and there's more moving parts to each meal. And and at its peak, they're there for a good 3 minutes while she's just walking through the building, and it's just, you just hear him rattling off all the rules, like this one doesn't like organic, this one does like organic, this one is having this one's having this, this one's having this, and that whole thing kind of happens and pushes you along, and it becomes very obvious as the movie goes that that's something that they're playing with, is this idea of grand consumption as an indicator of how they're feeling. There was one other thing that I wanted to address with this movie. I really liked the last sequence before she has her epiphany, where she goes back to her family home. And I think that for two reasons it works very well. Like, I think this is something to take a liberty on. I'm not 100% certain. I'm not a Princess Diana scholar. She died when I think it was in my lifetime, but if it was, I was very young, because it would have been the 90s. But she, what was I saying? Her house, I guess, shared a border with this manor that the king and queen went to for Christmas every year, in England. I could be wrong. That could be real life. I'm not 100% certain on that, and it seems like too big of a coincidence for it to not be a thing. Plus, it doesn't quite mesh with anything we've been told about her over the course of this movie, and her more middle class upbringing, for her to be sharing this border. So I think that was an add-on. At the end of the movie, toward the end of the movie, when she's going, instead of going to dessert with the family, she goes to her family home instead, and she goes through, and I think that, number one, the fact that it's there, and it's just visible at all times, and it becomes this nagging thing for her, is great, because it kind of symbolizes the life she left behind, and how it's something that she can't have back. And then when she goes there, and she goes into the house, and it's kind of just abandoned completely, like, as if people were living there and then just left all of a sudden, and then no one ever came back. Like, there's a dollhouse, and it's all her stuff. We're led to believe it's all her stuff. So, when she finally does go back, it's kind of this thing where it's like, you have abandoned this life, and you can't go back to this life. So by the time we get through the third act, and she's going through she does her thing where she's dancing through the halls of the manor, and then she goes out and stops the hunt for the birds, to go and get her sons and leave. When we get to that point, it's no longer, the big thing about this is past, present, and future. Very early on, we're introduced to that concept, and she says to Harry and William, and the only reason I know any of these characters' names besides Diana is because they're real people. So she says to them, it's like, here there is no future, and past and present are one. And then when she goes to that house and she has the conversation with the Anne Boleyn in her head, it's kind of this moment of realization it plays like, where it's kind of like she realizes that, I can't go back to this, and this is what I've been longing for, is for things to go back to the way they were, and that won't happen, so I need to go and do something different, and that's where that realization comes from. And I think that, like, why this movie works as a psychological thriller is because it's all things that make sense within the confines of the human psyche, and that is something that is the realization that has to happen to someone who is stuck in a depressive rut, who is, and I can say this as someone who suffers from, major depressive disorder, like, when you go through this and you feel like, this longing for the past, it's an easy way to fall deeper. And for her, going to that house and seeing that, look, you can see it, it's still there, but you can't go back to that life. That life is done, it's gone, it's not going to be here anymore. And I think that really does a good job of moving us into the next phase of the, into the next phase of the, of the third act. I cannot recommend this movie highly enough. If you can see it, definitely do. I don't know how wide of a release it's getting, but it had like a $20 million budget, so it's dirt cheap to make. But you can definitely get this movie in the theaters. It's definitely worth your time to watch. If you don't want to go to the theater, it'll definitely be on streaming at some point in the near future. I will say this again. I think that Pablo Larraín, I think his name is, the director. The only reason that I went to see this movie is because of him. Because he did direct Natalie Portman a few years ago in Jackie. I think she won the Academy Award for Jackie. And he did that. And I think that that's a skill he has. And this movie is so well done. I think it makes a very strong case for him to get a nomination for Best Director, I think. That's how strong of an entry this movie is. So if you enjoy, if you think that this is an excellent movie, based on the people who were sitting in the row in front of me rounding third base, great date night movie is their endorsement. So, so we'll wrap up there. Next week's a slow week, which is kind of annoying because, like, only Belfast comes out, and then, like, the week after is King Richard and fucking, like, Masters of the Universe, and I got, like, 6 things the weekend after. Like, Ghostbusters Afterlife, and then, like, this weekend, Belfast. That's it. They probably wanted to give a wide berth for Eternals, but whatever. We'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back with Belfast next week, probably Friday. So until then, have a great rest of your week.